Hello, this is Mr. Naughton. Welcome to our disease unit. The first thing we're going to be discussing is diseases. This will be day one of a 2-day lecture or a 2-day lesson. So we're going to cover about 20 to 24 slides today about diseases, about the different types of pathogens that enter the body, and a couple other things. And then the next day we'll get into the role that the immune system plays when those pathogens enter the body. And if you don't know what a pathogen is, you will soon. So, diseases. Here we go. First, I want to let you know about some definitions, some things you're going to be popping up here and there from the different slides, so you're not confused and you know exactly what they are. There's going to be two different types of diseases or illnesses: communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. Communicable disease is a disease or an illness you can catch from someone or something else. They can spread from person to person, and we'll talk about the different ways that communicable diseases can spread in our second day of this lecture. Non-communicable disease is a disease that you cannot catch from someone or something else, and we'll give you some examples of those on the next slide. Chronic disease or illness is an ongoing illness or disease. It usually is managed rather than cured, and chronic diseases are most associated with non-communicable diseases. And then acute diseases have a definite beginning and a definite end, and these are mostly associated with communicable diseases or illnesses that you can catch from someone or something else, like a cold. You can catch a cold from someone else. A cold has a beginning, but then you eventually get over the cold. And then a pathogen, what we mentioned earlier, is any agent or anything that can cause a disease or an illness that can enter the body, like bacteria or virus. Worms, fungus, and protozoas are also the other types. We're going to more focus on the bacterias and the viruses, but we'll also discuss a few worms, a few fungi, and a few protozoas as well. So, again, there are two distinct categories when we talk about diseases or illnesses. The non-communicable diseases, which you cannot be passed from one person to another, or it's non-transmittable. These are usually the chronic, ongoing, over a longer period of time, most often managed rather than cured. Some examples are cancer, osteoporosis, and alcoholism. Communicable diseases are the contagious ones. They are the catchable ones. These are the ones you can get from one person to another, or catch something in the air. These are usually acute, which means they have a beginning and they have an end, and they tend to be shorter in duration when we compare it to non-communicable diseases. The example are the cold or influenza or athlete's foot. And we're going to talk about these three types of communicable diseases plus more in the next upcoming slides. Today we are going to focus on communicable diseases. Pathogen, which you already know, is something that causes communicable diseases. So anything that can enter the body that can cause a communicable disease. The first type of pathogen we're going to discuss is a bacteria. This is microscopic, which means you cannot see it without a microscope. Bacteria, what it'll do is it'll do one of two things. It will either produce toxins that can kill or paralyze the cells in the body, or it will grow so fast that it takes over that area where it is infected. You can treat bacteria with antibiotics. Some examples of bacteria is pneumonia, strep, food poisoning, syphilis, and gonorrhea. Here are some photos of different types of bacteria. The top left is Salmonella. The top right is gonorrhea. Salmonella is a food poisoning bacteria. Gonorrhea is a bacterial sexually transmitted disease. The bottom left is E. coli. The middle one is syphilis, which is also another bacterial sexually transmitted disease. And the bottom right is the staph bacteria or the staph infection. The next type of pathogen that can cause a disease or an illness are viruses. Viruses reproduce by entering the cell of the body and take over the genetic makeup or the genetic machinery of the cell. So basically it will enter the cell and it will use the cell against itself to start producing more and more of this virus. Once the virus is produced enough inside that cell, it will destroy the original cell by bursting out and start spreading its virus to other cells so it can continue to reproduce and kill more and more of the body's cells. Now, viruses are not considered to be their own cells or even a living organism, but they're more of a protein coat with our body's copied genetic material inside so it can reproduce and destroy cells. Some examples of viruses: we have the influenza or the flu virus, the HIV virus, smallpox, and in the bottom left corner, the Ebola virus. And if you have been listening or watching the news in the last 18 months, you'll know that the Ebola virus has been causing some widespread panic throughout the country and throughout the world. The HIV virus has been very prominent since the mid 80s, and smallpox has been, for the most part, eradicated from the United States, but is still pretty relevant in other countries. And influenza is the flu, which is something that you know about, that you hear about every fall season. So here are some examples of viruses. Polio, also an example of a virus, and chickenpox, which all of you should have had as children. Chickenpox is a virus, and you can see the chickenpox virus up here in the top right corner, and then the result of the virus with the blisters on the face and on the body. And then polio, you can see the virus right here, and you can see someone who suffers from polio. Polio, also a very old virus that has been considered to be eradicated in the United States, but is making a comeback for people who do not vaccinate their children. So something to be aware of if you're ever lucky enough, much older, to have children. Vaccinate your kids. The herpes virus, also it can be either a sexually transmitted virus or a virus that is just communicable, which is just caught from maybe sharing a drink with someone or kissing. So it can be caught multiple ways. And then the rhinovirus, which is the common cold. The best way to prevent a cold, believe it or not, is washing your hands. Covering your mouth and nose when you sneeze is also a good way to prevent other people from getting a cold as well. But if you actually watch the video that I've shared with you, the Mythbusters, you'll actually see what is the best way to prevent air and nasal releases to be sent through the air. So I suggest you watch that video, and you'll learn something the next time you sneeze or feel like sneezing. Viruses do not respond to antibiotics, but the good news is there are antiviral medications to take. So don't ask for antibodies, or don't try to get antibiotics when you have a virus, but instead look for antiviral medications. Now, the third type of pathogen that causes disease or illness are worms. And worms could be parasites that actually are visible to the naked eye, so we can actually see them at times. Some examples of worms are tapeworms, where eggs are released in the feces, and the worm will attach itself to the intestine with these suction cup-like structures, and they'll actually steal food from you to live off of. And they will produce and reproduce, and they will continue to steal food until the tapeworm is removed. Hookworms. Hookworms use these hook-like structures, as you can see, like these jagged edges, and they will burrow into the skin. A common way to get hookworms are walking around barefoot in the soil. So wear socks and wear shoes, especially when you are walking outside. Never go outside barefoot for long periods of time. Trichinosis is a worm that's found, it's found in meat products. The most common meat product is undercooked pork. They're also found in products like in animals like bear and walrus, lion, and a couple other of hopefully animals that you are not eating. But pork, it's very common in pork. So when pork is not cooked properly, these worms are actually inside the pork, and they can attach inside the humans, and they can get infected with this worm. And then there are fungi, which are also parasites, and they use nutrients from the host. Some example of fungi are athlete's foot, ringworm, which is not actually a worm, it's actually a fungi, and jock itch. All of these will use, at some point, they use moisture and they use lack of cleanliness to be able to attach themselves to the body, and heat also plays a role as well to these parasites, that they will enter and attach themselves to the skin. So if you, especially with ringworm, I know with wrestlers or gymnasts, ringworm is very common. So make sure that whenever you are working out or whenever you are sweaty, that you should always take a shower, clean yourself off, and if there's any damp clothing that you have, to change your clothing or dry your clothing as soon as possible. Protozoas are single cell animal like parasites as well. Malaria is an example of a protozoa. It's transmitted by mosquito bites. And there is also amoebas that can cause dysentery, which is bloody diarrhea, which is never a good thing. So how do pathogens enter the body? Well, they can enter through the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And if you watch any of the videos that I share with you, you will know that pathogens are all over the place. You can't see most of them because they are microscopic, but they are floating around all over the place. So they can enter at any time. The reason we don't get sick all the time is because we are so used to them being around, and our body is used to making antibodies to fight these pathogens. They can also be entered through the sexual organs or the urinary route, and they can also enter through breaks in the skin, like injections, cuts, or bites. So a good thing to do is always stay clean, always wash your hands, and always cover up any cuts or any bites that you may have. Don't pick scabs and leave them exposed. So anything that is a break or a cut on the skin or any type of injection, you should have something covering it up, like a Band-Aid, to be safe so pathogens cannot enter. Some methods of transmitting communicable diseases. Airborne. Droplets from a cough or a sneeze can carry around germs. Sometimes, and you can't see these airborne droplets. They're all over the place. So when someone sneezes, you can see, you might be able to see something come out of their mouth or come out of their nose, but what you can't see is the pathogens that are traveling all over the place. And there was a Mythbusters video that I shared with you about just how far a sneeze can travel with using droplets and using colored droplets for them to show you just how far a sneeze can actually travel. So pretty interesting video. I suggest that you take a look at it. Direct personal contact also can contact with bodily fluids, a kiss, a handshake, sharing a drink. So that's why you should never share drinks or food with other people or eating utensils. You should always wash your hands and ensure that someone else has washed their hands before handshaking. And you should always make sure that the person that you are kissing or the person that you are coming in contact with does not have any illnesses or any diseases. Some other ways to transmit a communicable disease: contact with sewage. And not in this country, but we do know that in some other countries, the same water is used for bathing, is used for getting rid of sewage, and is used for drinking. So that can be a way that a communicable disease is passed on in other countries. You always have to be careful with any type of water or any type of area that could be next to sewage or that could be used for someone bathing. Contact with contaminated water. Like we mentioned, the amoeba in water in some countries can cause dysentery, and contact with contaminated food, Salmonella, E. coli, or contact with or eating of uncooked food. So we have to be very cognizant and very aware of those types of things that are out there that can cause diseases and illnesses. Now, there are 3 stages of a communicable disease, and you always have to remember the 3 I's, and you have to remember them in this order: Invasion. Pathogens enter, they invade, they begin to multiply. During this time, your body still feels okay. You feel fine. Then the incubation period occurs. This is what happens when pathogens are multiplying, where they're trying to gain control. This is where a time where you may be contagious in the final stages of incubation. You don't have much symptoms, but you may feel tired or you may feel a slight headache or fever. Okay, and this can vary in length. So you might not even know it, but you could already be contagious with a communicable disease, and you could be passing it on to somebody else without really feeling many symptoms. And then the final symptom is the infection. This is when you get the symptoms. You feel sick and you definitely are contagious, which means you can transmit the disease to other people. You always have to remember the 3 I's: invasion, incubation, infection, in that order. They invade, they start multiplying or incubate, and then you become infected with the disease. That is the end of this lesson. We will continue this tomorrow or the next day whenever you pick up on this again, and make sure that you are listening and taking notes if you are missing class. This disease unit goes by very, very quickly. It'll be over very quickly, so if you miss anything, make sure you get all caught up and you make sure that you understand the information that's given to you. There was a lot thrown at you today, so if you have any questions next time you're back in class, or if you're listening to this again as reinforcement, feel free to ask and we'll help you out with whatever you need. Until next time, this is Mr. Naughton signing out. Thank you for listening.